killing, the slayer must weigh and consider the question of killing and his reasons for and against such a choice. Instruction number 4. And again, at this point, let me just inject. Listen carefully to what we're doing, because you are going to be considering 3 potential options as to the crime. So most crimes will have what are referred to as lesser included. And what we will hear now and the following instruction refer to other crimes than first-degree murder or murder with a deliberate killing, so that you're not confused from the outset. And again, if you'll listen to all of the instructions, everything will come together, I think, appropriately. For you to find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser included offense as charged in count 1, the state must prove to your satisfaction beyond a reasonable doubt each of the following elements of the crime. And here there are also 5. Number 1, the defendant killed Jeremy Martin. Number 2, the defendant knew that the acts created a strong probability of death or great bodily harm to Jeremy Martin. Number 3, the defendant did not act as a result of sufficient provocation. Number 4, the defendant did not act in self-defense. Number 5, this happened in New Mexico on or about the 28th day of October of 2014. Instruction number 5, for you to find the defendant guilty of voluntary manslaughter, the state must prove to your satisfaction beyond a reasonable doubt each of the following elements of the crime, and here there are 5 as well. Number 1, the defendant killed Jeremy Martin. Number 2, the defendant knew that his acts created a strong probability of death or great bodily harm to Jeremy Martin. Number 3, the defendant acted as a result of sufficient provocation. Number 4, the defendant did not act in self-defense. And number 5, this happened in New Mexico on or about the 28th day of October of 2014. The difference between second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter is sufficient provocation. In second-degree murder, the defendant kills without having been sufficiently provoked, that is, without sufficient provocation. In the case of voluntary manslaughter, the defendant kills after being sufficiently provoked, that is, as a result of sufficient provocation. Sufficient provocation reduces second-degree murder to voluntary manslaughter. Number 6, you have been instructed on the crimes of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and voluntary manslaughter. You must consider each of these crimes. You should be sure that you fully understand the elements of each crime before you deliberate further. You will then discuss and decide whether the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree. If you unanimously agree that the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree, you will return a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree. If you do not agree, you should discuss the reasons why there is disagreement. If after reasonable deliberation you do not agree that the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree, you should move to the discussion of murder in the second degree. If you unanimously agree that the defendant is guilty of murder in the second degree, you will return a verdict of guilty of murder in the second degree. If you do not agree, you should discuss the reason why there is a disagreement. If after reasonable consideration, reasonable deliberation, you do not agree that the defendant is guilty of murder in the second degree, you should consider whether the defendant is guilty of voluntary manslaughter. If you unanimously agree the defendant is guilty of voluntary manslaughter, you will return a verdict of guilty of voluntary manslaughter. If you do not agree, you should discuss the reasons why there is a disagreement. You may not find the defendant guilty of more than one of the foregoing crimes. If you have a reasonable doubt as to whether the defendant committed any of the crimes, you must determine that he is not guilty of that crime. If you find him not guilty of all of these crimes, you must return a verdict of not guilty. Instruction number 7. Evidence has been presented that the defendant killed Jeremy Martin in self-defense. The killing is in self-defense if it meets the following 3 elements. 1. There was an appearance of immediate danger of death or great bodily harm to the defendant as a result of an assault by Jeremy Martin. And number 2, the defendant was in fact put in fear by the apparent danger of immediate death or great bodily harm and killed Jeremy Martin because of that fear. And 3, a reasonable person in the same circumstances as the defendant would have acted as the defendant did. The burden is on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not act in self-defense. If you have a reasonable doubt as to whether the defendant acted in self-defense, you must find the defendant not guilty. Instruction number 8. Evidence has been presented that the defendant was intoxicated from the use of alcohol or drugs. You must determine whether or not the defendant was intoxicated from the use of alcohol and drugs, and if so, what effect this had on the defendant's ability to form the deliberate intention to take away the life of another. The burden is on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was capable of forming deliberate intention to take the life of another. If you have a reasonable doubt as to whether the defendant was capable of forming such an intention, you must find the defendant not guilty of first-degree murder by deliberate killing. Number 9, instruction number 9. Sufficient provocation, this is a definition, can be by any action, conduct, or circumstances which arouse anger, rage, fear, sudden resentment, terror, or other extreme emotions. The provocation must be such as would affect the ability to reason and to cause a temporary loss of control in an ordinary person of average disposition. The provocation is not sufficient if an ordinary person would have cooled off before acting. Instruction number 10. Great bodily harm means an injury to a person which creates a high probability of death. Instruction number 11. A person who is threatened with an attack need not retreat. In the exercise of his right of self-defense, he may stand his ground and defend himself. Instruction number 12. In addition to the other elements of second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter, the state must prove to your satisfaction beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant acted intentionally when he committed the crime. A person acts intentionally when he purposely does an act which the law declares to be a crime, even though he may not know that his act is unlawful. Whether the defendant acted intentionally may be inferred from all of the surrounding circumstances, such as the manner in which he acts, the means used, and his conduct and any statements made by him. Instruction number 13. If you find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter, then you must determine if the crime was committed with the use of a firearm, and report your determination. You must complete the special form that will be attached as part of the verdicts to indicate your findings. With respect to any crime, for you to make a finding of yes, the state must prove to your satisfaction beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime was committed with the use of a firearm. Instruction number 14. An expert witness is a witness who by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education has become expert in any subject. An expert witness may be permitted to state an opinion as to that subject. You should consider each expert's opinion and the reasons stated for the opinion, giving them such weight as you think they deserve. You may reject an opinion entirely if you conclude that it is unsound. Instruction number 15. You should consider each opinion received in evidence in this case and give it such weight as you think it deserves. If you should conclude that the reasons given in support of the opinion are not sound, or for any other reason or opinion is not correct, you may disregard the opinion entirely. Instruction number 16. You alone are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight to be given to the testimony of each of them. In determining the credit to be given any witness, you should take into account the witness's truthfulness or untruthfulness, ability and opportunity to observe, memory, manner while testifying, any interest, bias, or prejudice the witness may have, and the reasonableness of the witness's testimony considered in the light of all of the evidence in the case. Instruction number 17. You are the sole judges of the facts in this case. It is your duty to determine the facts from the evidence that was produced here in court. Your verdict should not be based on speculation, guess, or conjecture. Neither sympathy nor prejudice should influence your verdict. You are to apply the law as stated in these instructions to the facts as you find them, and in this way decide the case. Instruction number 18. Your verdict must represent the considered judgment of each juror. In order to return a verdict, it is necessary that each juror agrees. Your verdict must be unanimous. It is your duty to consult with one another and to try to reach an agreement. However, you are not required to give up your individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but you must do so only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your own view and to change your opinion if you are convinced that it is erroneous. But do not surrender your honest conviction as to the weight or effect of evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the purpose of reaching a verdict. You are judges of the facts. Your sole interest is to ascertain the truth from the evidence in the case. Instruction number 19. You must not concern yourself with the consequences of your verdict. Instruction number 20. In this case, there are two possible verdicts. The first is guilty, the second not guilty. Only one of the possible verdicts may be signed by you. If you have agreed upon one verdict, that form of verdict is the only form to be signed. The other form is to be left unsigned. And so that this instruction doesn't confuse you, you will be finding 4 verdict forms. Only one of the forms, only one out of the 4 forms can be signed by you. Instruction number 21. Now the attorneys will argue the case. What is said in arguments is not evidence. It is an opportunity for the attorneys to discuss the evidence and the law that I have just instructed you on. The state has the right to argue first, the defense may then argue their case, and the state may then provide a reply. Mr. Byers, are you ready to proceed with your closing argument to the jury?
State's ready, Your Honor.
Please do so.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Might as well get started. We want to thank you for your attentiveness and your concern, especially the significant questions that you asked. Demonstrates that you have been very focused and take your duty seriously. Wanted to start with explaining, after you have had 2 weeks to review all of the evidence that we have submitted in this case, you heard the defendant on the stand last Friday, and he provided what he wanted you to believe is his version of what happened. We submit that there's something else that happened, and it is as follows. There was a dispute between Jeremy Martin and Tai Chan. We'll concede there are some contusions to the knuckles on Jeremy Martin's right hand. There's a picture of Tai Chan with a bloody nose. But it's the state's position that the amount of force that may have caused a bloody nose does not rise to the level of allowing Defendant Chan to murder somebody by shooting him in the back 5 times, shooting at him a total of 10 times. Please look closely at the instructions. They will guide you in this. We believe that the defendant, after he was punched in the nose, he said he was punched in the nose, fine. He's got a bloody nose, fine. He stood over the edge of the bed and let the blood drip out of his nose. Now, why do we say that? Let's take a look at the photograph that has become all too popular in this particular case. If I could have just a moment, please. There we go. Now, what you're seeing on your monitors is one of the state's exhibits that shows this area where the blood drops are on this comforter. And if you take a look at the area where the blood drops are on the comforter, the bed is located next to the wall with dividing the sleeping quarters from the bathroom. It's the state's position that that's where the defendant just stopped and hung his head and let his nose drop blood. Now, there was a lot of hubbub about, well, my goodness, was that ever tested? Well, turns out it hadn't been before the trial. So, instead of hiding anything or feeding into any idea that somebody is being railroaded, what did the state do? We sent it up to the lab. We got it tested. When we sent it up to the lab, did we have any idea whose blood was on there? Nope, not at all. Could have been Jeremy Martin's blood. If it came back that way, what would happen to our case? No, we're looking for the truth. We sent it up, we got it tested. It comes back, whose blood is it? Defendant's blood. He's dripping blood out of his nose. His conduct that evening was that of an intoxicated little frat boy. Somebody who could not accept the reality that he just got punched in the nose, and he didn't like it. He had said that he had been acting obnoxiously that night. So, remember the language in the jury instructions talking about whether or not a reasonable person would have cooled off. That's when a reasonable person would have cooled off. As the blood is dripping out of his nose, he should have gone over to the bathroom. He should have reconciled with his partner, and they should have gone on about their business. Or he could have called the cops or gotten another room or done any number of things. But no. What did he do? He went and he got his bag. His weapon. Black bag. Right next to his bed. Reaches down, picks it up. That's how he chose to deal with it. Now, why would we bring this theory in front of you? The ear witnesses. Edward Hazelwood. Oh no. Oh God. Edward Hazelwood doesn't know any of the other witnesses. None of the other witnesses knew each other. They did have an opportunity to decide that they were going to combine their stories and collude to frame Mr. Chan. No, he said what he heard. Why would Jeremy Martin say, oh no, oh God? Because this defendant is threatening him with his life. He got on the stand Friday and told you, oh, Jeremy Martin turned around with the gun in his left hand and said, I'm going to shoot you. No, that didn't happen that way. He had the gun in his right hand, and he turned, and now he's threatening Jeremy. He couldn't beat him man to man, so he's got to get the gun. So he does. That's where we hear when Jeremy realizes somebody is about to take his life. How do we know that it's Jeremy saying that? Again, testimony of Edward Hazelwood. He said it is the same voice that said, oh no, oh God, that he heard after the footsteps went running past his door toward the elevator, crying in misery, moaning, sobbing, why is this happening to me? That's how we know that it's Jeremy Martin who realized that his life was about to end. That's how we know. Now there's the issue about the round in the overhead. Jeremy Martin, it's our belief, tried to deflect the gun upward, discharging one round in the overhead. Tai Chan got on the stand and said, oh, I grabbed it with all my strength and I pushed down. Bullets don't do 180 degrees in midair. If it pushed down, then why isn't there a round in the floor? No, it's up. Once the gun was deflected, but still not in Jeremy Martin's control, he had no option but to flee. So he does, and he receives gunshot wounds to, we believe, his right arm and also his back as he's leaving the door. Remember, defendant said, as he left the room, he did not see Jeremy Martin in possession of a firearm. We'll get into that in more detail. The next important thing is that the defendant lost sight of Jeremy Martin. When he lost sight of Jeremy Martin, it's important because Jeremy Martin was no longer a threat. Even if you believe what the defendant said up to this point, at that point, Jeremy Martin is definitively not a threat. What does the defendant do? He advances, goes into the hallway, sees his target again, fleeing from his own mouth, fleeing down the hallway, shoots him. Who's that backed up by? Marvin Zamora. We'll get into more detail about Marvin Zamora's testimony as we go forward. He could have gone the other direction. He says he was just so terrified, he thought that Jeremy might shoot him. So he runs after him because he might shoot him. Okay? He's terrified he needs to find a place to hide from Jeremy. He could have gone the other direction. Instead of turning left out of his room, he could have turned right. Gone down that stairwell. Gone down to the lobby area. Got in touch with some security guard or hotel person. Called for 911. Done something. No. He doesn't do that. He goes and follows Jeremy Martin. And then, whenever he realizes that, I need a cover story. Now, it's off to the stairwell. He goes to his little hidey hole up to the top. As far up as he can get. Can't get out. It's locked. About this time, because of the quick reaction of the Las Cruces Police Department, he hears the lights, he hears the sirens, he hears the dogs coming into the stairwell. He knows he's trapped. He has no option but to then sit there and try to concoct a story. Now, the defense theory, let's contrast that. Oh, they're saying that there's black powdery substance on Jeremy's left palm. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
They're saying that there's this black powdery substance on Jeremy Martin's left palm. All right. They claim Jeremy Martin is left-handed. This is how a left-handed shooter uses that weapon. Where's his left palm? Right next to the grip. When you discharge it, if there's any gases or soot, where's it going to go? Out of the barrel? Out of the ejection chamber, out of the ejection port, right? The palm is right next to the grip. The left hand is next to the grip. Ain't gonna work. Where's his right hand? Cupped underneath. Right? Fingers interlaced. That's the way it works. Let's try that theory if it's right here. Same deal. Where's the left palm? Skin to skin, knuckle in between, the fingers in between the knuckles. No powder anywhere on that left hand. Consider this. What's the possibility of powder getting on Jeremy?
We can't hear Mr. Byers.
Mr. Byers is, that's why I encouraged you to investigate.
What is the possibility of any powder getting on Mr. Martin's left hand? If he deflected the weapon with it. Now, the other part is this. There was no test for any gunshot residue concerning Jeremy Martin's hand. The doctor didn't attest that it was definitively gunpowder. That's left in your province to determine. But I submit to you that the laws of physics cannot be denied. They might want to might want to get you to believe that water is no longer wet, but believe me, it is. Their story does not hold water. The other theory that they have concerns the holsters. Showing you State's Exhibit 302, paddle holster. The way it's supposed to work is this little paddle contoured to go next to your body, fits right in there like that. If you're right-handed, reach down, pull it out, there you go.
Yeah, Mr. Vice, as close to the mic as you can.
Paddle holster, right hand, reach down, pull it out, you're ready to fire. Let's try that on the left-hand side. Now the weapon is backwards. You heard Detective Torres testify. Officers don't do it like that. You might see somebody in a movie walking around that way, but in real life, no. You don't do things that do not work and allow for somebody to take your weapon from you. It's unfeasible. And especially if you're a left-handed shooter, like they claim that he is, the weapon's backwards. It just won't work. State's Exhibit 301, concealment holster for his small backup. Same thing. Now the defense will say, well, he could wear it over here. Not inside his pants, as it's designed, but somehow between the belt and the pants on the outside. Same laws of physics apply. Left-handed shooter can't do it. It doesn't work. Right-handed shooter, you're violating all the laws and principles that any firearms instructor has ever taught a law enforcement officer. Don't work. Can't buy that theory. They're basing their whole story on the presumption about this questionable substance on Jeremy Martin's left hand. Well, we'll get to more detail about this substance on Jeremy Martin's left hand and why it is totally, their theory is totally unreasonable. There is yet another reason why their story is full of holes, and it is as follows. The defendant, on cross-examination, admitted that if he had two firearms in front of him, one was his and one was somebody else's, if he needed to use a firearm, he would choose to use his own. Detective Torres said the same thing. Anybody who has ever used a firearm, or most importantly, has ever used a firearm that they would depend on to save their life, you know it, you live it, you breathe it, and for the defendant to have the audacity to say that, oh, he didn't realize until he got to the stairwell that he was holding his own weapon, please. As many rounds as he has fired through that weapon, it's modified with a flashlight. It sets the balance off. If it was anybody else's that didn't have a flashlight, like Jeremy's, he would know it instantly. Because if you don't have balance on your weapon, your aiming is going to be off. Anybody that's fired a weapon knows that. The other issue is Jeremy Martin was never armed. Ever. Period. Period. There were no weapons found in the hallway, in the elevator, in the lobby, or in the room. The only weapons that were in the room were in the blue bag that was zipped. Two firearms belonging to Jeremy Martin and one knife. That's it. He never had a deadly weapon. Ever. All the casings belonged to Tai Chan's gun. You heard forensic scientist Steve Guerra, who the defense recognized as one of the premier firearm and tool mark experts in the state of New Mexico, and frankly, knowing Mr. Guerra, I don't dispute their characterization of his prowess. He said he analyzed it. All the shell casings came from that firearm. The defendant acknowledged, yep, that's the round count. He loads it, tops it off, 15 rounds, racks the slide, 1 in the chamber, 14 left in the magazine. No missing shell casings. All of them from his gun. Now let's talk about the differences between Jeremy Martin and Ty Chan. Opening statement, I mentioned this is a story of excess versus moderation. When Jeremy Martin felt that he'd had enough to drink that night, he switched to water. Ty Chan kept drinking. When they went to the hotel after leaving Dublin's, Jeremy helped the defendant into the hotel. You heard the defendant say, well, I didn't really feel like I needed the help, but he was being friendly, so I went ahead and accepted it. What was in Jeremy's mind? Hey, here's my law enforcement brother. He's a little bit 2 sheets to the wind, or however many sheets we want to count. I'm going to help him. I'm going to bring him back in. I'm going to make sure that he's safe and sound. Because that's what brothers of a brotherhood do. When Ty Chan came up missing, what did Jeremy Martin do? He went looking for him. He checked with the front desk. He checked with other people in the hotel. He was looking for his partner. Chan says, oh, he's framing him for murder. What did Jeremy say? Nobody's getting arrested. Nobody's going to jail. How do we know that? Leah Tavoya said she heard that. Okay. Now let's talk about deliberation. First-degree murder. Ladies and gentlemen, we submit to you that if there was ever a clear case of first-degree murder, this is it. This is it. There is no sufficient provocation. There is no intoxication. And there's no right of self-defense. This is first-degree murder, plain and simple. If I could have a moment, Charlie?
Yes, sir.
Where's he? With us.
When getting results matters to you, it matters where you get your news. At KRQE News 13, we ask the tough questions.
Is this possible?
Uncover the facts.
To put down the shotgun.
And double-check the details.
We have a second witness
to give you the complete story.
University says
we do this all day, every day, so you can trust the information you get. KRQE News 13 is reporting you can trust.
To be sequential. They will contain the same information, but it will not be in the same organizational structure.
So are you going to be referring to both what's on the screen and the chart at the same time, or are you going to go through what's on the screen and then come back to the chart?
Going through what's on the screen first, and then going back to the chart you're on. What we're going to do is take you through the testimony of the major witnesses who hold key pieces of evidence in this case. Let's take a look at the first one, Edward Hazelwood. He said he heard a first set of shots, shouting, a voice in disbelief. Oh God, oh no. A scuffle, initial shot, and 3 shots. Okay. Then he said he heard a pause. And he heard running. Then he said he heard a second set of shots and a volley of shots. Same voice in disbelief. Why is this happening to me? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to focus on this sequence. Shots, pause, shots. If I could have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead. Is there anyone on the jury who cannot see the lettering or the wording on the chart? Although, Mr. Myers, I understood that you were going to go through the Alamo and then.
Yes, Your Honor. However, we need to modify that. So.
Then just make sure that you're moving the microphone over to you. Just make sure that you can be heard.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So what we have is the first set of shots, the pause, and the second set of shots. Now we go to the next witness. Mary Ann Hale. Now remember, Edward Hazelwood was in the room to the left of Jeremy Martin and the defendant. Mary Ann Hale was on the room to the right of Jeremy Martin and the defendant. First set of shots. Voices, argue, bang against the wall, rapid shots, closer together. That's the first set. Pause. Second set of shots. Second sequence of gunfire in the hallway. Get the fuck out of here. Smell of gun smoke under the door, then no voices. So we have Mary Ann Hale, voices, rapid shots, pause, get the fuck out of here, gunfire, gunfire, and get the fuck out of here. Next witness, Laurie Deshvanalo. First set of shots, 2 pops. Pause. Second set of shots, 3 pops. Now get the fuck out of here. Two pops, pause, three pops. Now get the fuck out of here. Next witness, Ms. Kano. First set of shots, 6 to 7 shots. Pause. Get out of here. Second set of shots. She says more shots and running. Ms. Cassandra Kano. Shots, pause, more shots. Next witness, Mr. Hudson, Georgia, pecan farmer. First set of shots. Screaming, explosive argument, rapid shots. Pause. Second set of shots. Slow. Boom, boom, boom. I know you all remember his testimony because he said that he is a quail hunter and he knows that whenever the covey flushes, there's this blast of gunfire, but the quail are taken in that last volley because those are aimed, measured shots. Slow, methodical. Boom, boom, boom. Hallway shots. Next witness, Mr. Regelbrugger. First set of shots, rapid report. And a pause. Second set of shots, methodical reports. Boom, boom, boom. Now there's one other witness that took the stand. He told you the same thing. His name is Tai Chan. First set of shots. I turned around and just started shooting. Pause. I saw him run out the door. Remember, he says, as he saw him run out the door, he did not see a firearm. Second set of shots. I ran out the door and just started shooting. In response to Mr. Clark's questions, he said he was just running away. No weapon. No weapon. He's just running away. Thank you, Your Honor. I'll take care of it. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something that I really want to point out to you here. this helps in your deliberations. Right here on the first set of shots, you have enough evidence in the state's belief to find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. There is no self-defense, there is no intoxication, and there's no sufficient provocation. But on the off chance that anyone has any doubt whatsoever, take a look at this center column. Every witness testifies to a pause, including the defendant. Remember, state's expert Joe Foster, who said that even concealed carry license holders are taught if the person is not armed, you can no longer shoot at them. If they are running away from you, you cannot shoot at them. What did Captain Gonzalez say? It's in their SOP. It's in the academy training. You cannot shoot at an unarmed person. What did the defendant say? I saw him run out. What did he say whenever I cross-examined him? Nope, didn't have a weapon. Remember that thing about cooling off? This is where that reasonable person standard of cooling off should have occurred. Right here where all those pauses are. Okay? If this person had been a concealed carry holder, average citizen, not even a concealed carry holder, that's where that would apply. In this section right here, in the center column. Should be thinking. Remember Mr. Foster mentioned the OODA loop? Assess, engage, reassess. Remember that the defendant was testifying about that? Yes, that's what I was trained to do. It's that assessment process that the law looks at for a person to be able to make up their mind as to what they're supposed to be doing. This is a trained person that we're talking about. We're not talking about Joe Civilian. We're talking about a trained person who is supposed to be able to respond, observe, record, relate what happened to him. What did he say every time he was asked about, well, what happened? Oh, I don't remember. The state is not obligated to prove its case beyond all possible doubt. But this last column definitely gives you beyond a reasonable doubt. The second set of shots. Last column on the right. At this point, everyone heard the second set. The evidence, the shell casings in the hallway, clearly reveal that this defendant had to step out of the room into the hallway and shoot down the hallway. That's where the shell casings landed. All of these, I ran out the door and just started shooting. He was just running away. Those are the defendant's words. Those aren't the state's words. We didn't put that in his mouth. Those are the defendant's words. At that time, he is shooting an unarmed man. Ladies and gentlemen, although the law requires that you must follow the court's instructions and consider all of the instructions that the court has read you concerning the different levels of homicide that are presented to you in this case, second and voluntary. It's our position that there is more than enough evidence to prove that this defendant committed first-degree murder. Talk about there is no intoxication defense. There's no intoxication defense because if you look at the testimony of Dr. Ned Siegel, he said, look, the estimates from Dr. Marcinski, the defense's expert, and his, okay, they match. That's fine. It's the estimate of the BAC, 0.24. Okay, give you that. But then what did he say? Well, first of all, what did Dr. Marcinski say? She said that consumption of energy drinks will make a person feel that they're not as intoxicated as they actually are. Okay, fine. Dr. Siegel said that basically the defendant's conduct proves that he had a high tolerance, for consumption of alcohol. Recall what Dr. Siegel said about the defendant walking backwards down a flight of stairs with his hands behind his head? Who can do that when they're sober, right? It's not easy. He did. Didn't fall, didn't stumble. Remember the defense's expert, Dr. Trumpeter, who said that in officer-involved shootings, they took a sample of 300 shootings and they said that, okay, the hit ratio is like from 23% up to a high of 68%. So basically, if an officer is engaging a target and he's in a shooting scenario, then he can expect to possibly hit as low as 23% and maybe as high as 68% of his rounds that he discharges. What's the defendant's hit ratio? 50% at the high end of that scale. Can he be knocked down, commode hugging drunk and hit 50%? No. Remember, this is the guy who can walk down a flight of stairs backwards. He was also immediately able to convey the name and addresses of his family and communicate with officers effectively. He was very articulate. He was able to show his ID to the officers in the stairwell. He understood what was going on. Any intoxication amount that he had, this is the critical part. If I may retrieve the weapon, Your Honor. Yes. Now, you heard Mr. Guerra testify that this is a semi-automatic pistol. Pulling the trigger one time, it does not automatically cycle back like a fully automatic weapon, right? Everybody understands that. This defendant had to make a conscious choice to pull that trigger each and every time that he fired it. He had to acquire a target. That's what he's trained to do. You don't just shoot indiscriminately, because every law enforcement officer is accountable to the citizenry and the public for everything that they do, including sending rounds down range. You shoot it, you own it. He had to acquire a target. He had to individually think 10 times. He had to think 10 times he is killing Jeremy Martin. That is not a mistake. That is a deliberate thought process that is not clouded by any consumption of alcohol. Yes, Your Honor. This is this is State's Exhibit 300. Now, this is the body diagram, anatomical body diagram, that was marked on by Dr. Aljinovich, who is the forensic pathologist who testified before you early in the case. Remember, she says she is the one who identified all of the wounds to Jeremy Martin's body inflicted by gunshot wounds as having been fired at him from behind. Let's start with I. The wound to the tricep area, that big gaping wound. There's another one, E. It's located where the pin is. Okay. That exits over here at B on the chest. It's the state's belief that that was found to be projectile at location marker 6 in the hallway, because that one came back positive for DNA. We have gunshot wound G, right shoulder, lodged in the neck. We have gunshot wound D, entered on the right flank, lower right flank, traveled through the body, lodged in the front of the liver after destroying the liver. We have entry gunshot wound C, which was on the left buttock, lodged just in front of the bladder. All of them, back and front. Defendant said that he was on the floor and shooting at Jeremy Martin. Laws of physics. If he was on the floor shooting at Jeremy Martin, we would have trajectories that are going upward, right? Talk about the eyewitness testimony. Marvin Zamora, you heard him say that he heard the gunshot. He poked around that pillar that was there, and he saw Jeremy Martin come down the hallway. Now, how did he describe Jeremy Martin? He said he described him as holding his right arm. Then he said he saw the defendant emerge from the room and started shooting at Jeremy Martin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how many people you may have seen who have seen somebody else murdered, but Marvin Zamora sat there in that witness stand and he told you he had seen somebody murdered that day. He was very, very distraught. Over a year later, you can tell Marvin Zamora was still very distraught, but there's something very, very important going on here. The information about Jeremy Martin being shot, that wasn't common knowledge. Being shot in the arm, nope. That's an eyewitness for you. Here's the other part. The defense says, oh, there's some black powdery substance that's on Jeremy Martin's hands. That's the state's exhibit 3, showing you the lobby down here. Robert Miller said that he saw Jeremy Martin, the doors open, Jeremy Martin take a step out, fall to the ground, crawl to his final resting place right there. This is the interior of the elevator. Huge amounts of blood. States 230. Huge amount of blood. States 231. Jeremy Martin was bleeding profusely from his wound on his right arm, drizzling down the side of the car. But most importantly, let's take a look at something else. Maybe hard to see there, but you'll see it in the tour when these things go back to you. This copious amount of low velocity blood spatter, basically blood droplets, that's dripping on the floor here in this corner where Jeremy Martin is standing as he's riding the elevator car down all the way from the top. Huge amounts of blood. If that's not enough, we have the statements of Officer Connie Hurd, who said that he was covered in blood. Sergeant Todd Froats, who said that he was covered in blood. You heard him exclaim, "I need hand sanitizer, I need hand sanitizer, there's blood everywhere," after they were able to successfully get him into the unit and drive him out of there. It is extremely reasonable to presume that if there was any real gunpowder on Jeremy Martin's left hand, this gaping wound, him trying to control the bleeding of it, it would have washed off. There's a huge amount of blood. Huge. He was covered in it. He was treated. Now the defendant said that he's a law enforcement officer. He's at the top of the stairwell, yelling out, "Sheriff's Department, Sheriff's Department." I submit to you that the real law enforcement officers are officers like Sergeant Froats, Officer Connie Hurd, Officer Joshua Savage, Bainey, Miguel Moore, those who put together the team to go into the hotel stairwell not knowing what they would find and encounter this person who acted like law enforcement officers, because law enforcement officers, you heard them testify, they have an obligation to protect the public. The defendant was not taking any action to protect the public. He was acting like he was afraid that he would get caught for doing something. Instead of securing the scene, what does he do? He hides. That's not enough. He makes distracting statements. I'll give it to him. He's not stupid. He makes distracting statements. If they don't have enough resources to focus on the murder investigation, then that gives him another opportunity to get off. So what does he do? He concocts this lie about the bomb. Here's a person who is trained to relate, observe, record. He has no specifics for anybody. He never mentions Jeremy Martin, ever. The threat that he is claiming that he is so afraid of, he won't even alert the officers to where he believes that perceived threat is, what description that perceived threat of clothing he may be wearing, or whether or not he's armed with a weapon. He can't say he's armed with a weapon because he himself knows he's not. That's why this is first-degree murder. Leah Tafoya's statement. Probation officer, not average citizen. She knows Tai Chan's voice. Are you kidding me? Of course she knows his voice. They're living together. They have a child together. She hears the shots. She's got to think quick. She's got to think on her feet. She said, well, please no, please no. Well, I thought it was Tai. On Mr. Ruark's cross-examination, she finally admitted the truth. She says, well, I couldn't tell. She couldn't tell because it was Jeremy Martin who was pleading for his life. Her statement about the please no matches perfectly with Edward Hazelwood's recollection of what he heard. The pleading for his life. There's something else that I'd like you to think about, ladies and gentlemen, as you're deliberating on this. The defense expert, Mr. Trumpeter, he was asked, well, what are some of the reasons that an officer might shoot somebody in the back? And he started describing turning and so on, reaction times to seeing a perceived threat, all that other kind of stuff. And then he said something very chilling. He said, murder is another one. And that's what we have here. Now, the defense tried to make a lot out of the DNA profile. That's what it is, a profile. Scientist Raman Sandhu Kurmer said that there was a mixture of 2 or more DNA profiles which could not be excluded. The major contributor is defendant Tai Chan. But there's somebody else out there besides Jeremy Martin who has a similar profile, not DNA, profile. So because of the strictures of the research requirements, they cannot exclude that person, but they cannot definitively say that it's Jeremy Martin. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if Jeremy Martin had been the first aggressor in this case with a firearm, his DNA would have been all over that grip. If you want to believe what the defendant said about, oh, I wrestled with the gun and so on and so forth, think Jeremy Martin would have left some skin cells behind on that rough grip surface? You betcha. But no, we don't have his skin cells. We don't have his DNA. We have a profile from which he cannot be excluded. 6,899 other people. Now, the defendant also said no one would help him. He's going down the hallway and no one would help him. He wants you to believe that he is this highly trained SWAT officer sworn to protect the public. And he's saying at that point that he thinks that people who are asleep after midnight in a hotel it's their responsibility to get up out of a sound sleep and come and help him. He's the sworn officer. He is the one who's supposed to be taking action. And what action does he take? He hides himself. He does not cooperate with law enforcement. And then there is this. Defendant Chan said that he believes it is legal to shoot at somebody because of what they might possess. Hold that thought for a little bit. That means that according to Defendant Chan, anybody, if a law enforcement officer thinks that a person might possess something, then they're fair game to be killed. That does not make sense in any way, shape, or form. That is not what law enforcement officers are taught. That is not how law enforcement officers perform. And frankly, that is a disgrace to even allege that that is some type of a reasonable theory of conducting oneself as a law enforcement officer or as a private citizen or as a human being. You get to kill somebody because of what you think they might possess? No way. No way. That is not our system of justice. That's not our society. And ladies and gentlemen, we have presented to you proof well beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. And we ask you to return a guilty verdict of first-degree murder against this defendant, Tai Chan. Thank you, Your Honor.
We're going to go ahead and take a short 10-minute recess in order to transition the other parties' arguments. And so we're going to cover the
Who drives, sir? Who drives?
we're going to recess so that we can transition over to the defendant's
Sorry.